South Park has always excelled at taking topics that might seem wildly offensive at first and transforming them into clever social commentary. Over the years, this approach has sparked plenty of controversy, but also contributed to making South Park one of the most popular TV shows of all time. Today, we'll be exploring how South Park portrayed a neurological disorder. We're diving into South Park's infamous Tourette syndrome episode. This episode was actually praised by the Tourette's Association of America and also helped educate the public about what the disorder actually involves. The direct statement from TSA was,
"I just needs to check your asshole."
Hold on, not that TSA. That's better. I guess when they were founded, they were called the Tourette Syndrome Association, hence TSA, but later changed to the Tourette's Association of America. So we'll just call them TAA from now on. Anyways, their statement was, "Despite our pre-airing trepidations, we do concede that the episode was well researched. There was a surprising amount of accurate information conveyed. No doubt, this South Park episode did generate increased national awareness about Tourette syndrome. They did have some criticisms though, which we'll get to during the episode analysis. Le Petit Tourette. This is a near-perfect episode in my opinion. I wouldn't go as far to call it the best episode in the series, but in my opinion, this episode perfectly encapsulates what South Park is at its core. It features Eric Cartman being his horrible and offensive self, discusses and educates us about a sensitive topic, and of course, has brilliant pop culture references.
Why don't you have a seat?
Before we get started, this video is sponsored by... yeah, right. I probably wouldn't even get sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends. Tough times. But if you want to support, liking the video or subscribing would help out. Enough yapping, let's get started. Disclaimer, I am not a neurologist, nor do I have Tourette syndrome. This video is not meant to diagnose or give medical advice to anyone. It is purely for entertainment purposes. The episode begins in a toy safari. The South Park fan wiki says that this is supposed to be a parody of Toys R Us, but I looked it up and it's actually a real store in California founded in 1992. Yeah, I like to give you useless facts when I do research for these episodes. You'll get used to it. Anyways, while Cartman is shopping for toys, we meet a young boy named Thomas.
Cock!
Eric is obviously a little confused by the random profanities. A worker at the store walks up to the boy's mom and she explains that her son has Tourette syndrome.
It's a neurological disorder. He can't control what he says.
While waiting in line, Cartman has had enough and confronts the kid, thinking he's the one Thomas is directing these words to. His mother again has to explain Tourette's to everyone around. When I watched this episode as a kid, I didn't really think much about this scene, but as an adult, it's hard to not feel sympathy for Thomas and his mom here. Could you imagine having to explain to people everywhere you go about Tourette's? That's actually really sad when you think about it, especially considering how rare it is. Less than 1% of people have Tourette's, and only 10% of those people have coprolalia. You also have to keep in mind when this episode released. In 2007, people were a lot less understanding of what Tourette's even was. The empathy you feel is quickly drowned out by one of the funnier intro scenes in the entire show. When Cartman realizes that Thomas will never get in trouble no matter what he says, he of course has found his golden ticket.
'Cause I got a golden ticket.
I've got a golden chance to make my way.
Cartman is able to easily convince his mom that he now has Tourette's, and she takes him to the Colorado Neurology Center. The doctor tells us that Tourette's is a hereditary disease and doesn't usually just suddenly start. The exact cause of Tourette syndrome is still a mystery, but research has proven there are genetic factors, and it seems to be an inherited condition. However, Tourette's can skip generations and present itself as OCD or ADHD in other family members. Just because you don't know a family member with it doesn't mean you can't develop it either. So what Cartman is trying to do here is technically possible, especially for a 10-year-old. Though this is still obviously exaggerated. You wouldn't just be spouting this many cuss words like he is after a single night of sleep. It would progress much more slowly over time. Eric gets what he wants out of the doctor and gets told that he will make sure everyone at school will be accepting of his disorder.
Bingo.
The hallway scene is easily one of the most iconic of this episode. It's always in those poorly edited, South Park, most offensive clips, compilations, but for good reason.
Good morning, Principal Victoria. Shitballs!
Cartman is basically having the time of his life. This scene is Eric Cartman in a nutshell. This episode also gives us one of Craig's best one-liners.
If I could say shitballs to the principal, I'd be so happy.
Cartman gives a little speech about his tics, and Principal Victoria assures Eric that everything is okay and they think he's very brave.
He's faking.
Of course, Kyle is the one to see right through Cartman's lie. This is a prime example of why I actually really like Kyle as a character. He isn't completely entertaining on his own or as well written as, say, Butters or Randy, but he provides constant conflict within Cartman's life, making for some of the show's best moments. When Kyle calls him out, Cartman uses the, "well, what are you gonna do, tell on me?" strategy that he's definitely used before.
What are you gonna do, Kyle? Tell on me? Then you'll be a great big no-good double-faced poopy pants tattletale.
We then get shown how disruptive Cartman can be inside of a classroom when he has free reign to say whatever he wants.
Booge, balls, bloody vaginal belch.
Okay, but even though that's really disgusting, can we just appreciate the creativity here? How does one even come up with that? Kyle starts getting really annoyed and tells Eric to stop. And as we know, if you give Cartman an inch, he will take a mile. Garrison goes to the principal to complain about Cartman, claiming that he can't properly teach the class as Eric has become such a distraction. This is actually a real-life issue that has come up in schools. Though it's not fair to use Cartman as an example here because, well, we all know he's doing it on purpose. However, this is a controversial topic. Depending on the severity of tics, it can be extremely distracting to a classroom and even to the student who has Tourette's, as they might have difficulty concentrating in class because they're focusing on trying to control their tics. It's a case-by-case basis, and not all people with Tourette's can fall under the same category. Principal Victoria responds by saying she has brought Mr. Donaldson from the Tourette's Tolerance and Understanding Foundation. It's not a real foundation, by the way. I checked. Mr. Donaldson is a great one-off character that I wish could have been used more throughout the series. As a kid around middle school age when this episode came out, this was probably one of the most commonly quoted lines at school.
Behind us now. Piss out my ass!
Just as he's being introduced, Kyle comes into the office ready to expose Cartman for lying about his Tourette's. The moment Mr. Donaldson hears this, he immediately gets angry with Kyle, explaining that nobody would want this illness. Kyle is taken to a children's therapy center where Mr. Donaldson runs a support group. The children, including Thomas, explain the struggles of Tourette's and how difficult it is to live with. This scene was extremely well researched and is mostly praised by people with Tourette's. It's really interesting when they explain what an urge to tic actually feels like. They compare it to a cough or a sneeze. I've also heard it explained like this. If you think really hard, you can hold your breath, in the same way that if you think really hard, you can usually hold tics back, but eventually, you have to breathe. It's also been described by some people as an itch, tingling, or aching feeling that doesn't go away until you tic. Another person described it as a similar feeling to restless leg syndrome, a building pressure that doesn't go away until you act on it. I just find Tourette's really interesting. It isn't a one-size-fits-all condition. Each person with it experiences it in a unique and varied way. Kyle decides to apologize because he's really unable to explain how only Cartman was faking it. The kids with Tourette's cannot possibly fathom how any single person would fake such a disorder. Which is perfectly fair. They have suffered with it most of their lives. They can't even see the possibility of someone finding it fun. But of course, we do know someone who would find it fun. The next scene is in the running for the funniest of the episode. Cartman goes completely wild here.
Yeah! Piss out your ass right onto Kyle's mom's fat Jew face!
He can't just be happy that he got away with faking it. He has to make sure to rub it in Kyle's face as hard as possible. As Cartman is leaving, he says something to Thomas.
Isn't having Tourette's awesome?
Finally, someone else is aware that Cartman is a fraud. Let's talk about faking Tourette's for a minute. This is something that people have actually done in real life. Not usually for their own amusement like Cartman, but for monetary gain. There's been videos exposing a TikToker who was later confirmed to be faking the disorder. You don't need me to tell you how f***ed up this is, but what a lot of people don't realize is how badly this can harm people who actually struggle with Tourette's. Not only are you being scum by attempting to profit off of a condition you find quirky, but you're also bringing out the tinfoil hat wearers who think everything in life is a conspiracy. I've seen social media influencers who are genuinely diagnosed by licensed professionals, and people tell them all the time in their comment section that they're faking it. Some of these people even go as far as to deny that Tourette's is a real thing. It's actually a little concerning people like this exist. Yes, there have been cases of people faking the disorder, but that is a very small percentage of people, and you're doing more harm by trying to accuse everyone who claims to have Tourette's as faking it. That is just weird behavior. I wouldn't be saying this if I didn't find so many comments like this while researching for this video, but it's just something that really annoyed me, so I had to talk about it. Cartman devises a plan to get onto Dateline, so that he can say horrible things nationwide. And here we see our first appearance of Chris Hansen. So right off the rip, I'm gonna let you know that I f***ing love To Catch a Predator. I'm someone who rarely rewatches TV shows. I can really only think of 3 different shows that I'll rewatch every couple years: South Park, Dexter, and To Catch a Predator. Watching these perverted freaks get arrested and then having them willingly sit down and be interviewed about it just hits the dopamine receptors differently. I'm neutral on Chris Hansen as a person. He probably did have a little too much influence during this show, like a journalist probably shouldn't be directing law enforcement. I get some of the critiques, but man, was that show entertaining. Even talking about it is making me want to rewatch it. The way Cartman was able to get on the show was by writing Chris Hansen a touching letter.
Donkey boner.
When Kyle hears about Eric going on national TV, he confronts him about it. Cartman explains that he's gonna say horrible things about Jewish people, when suddenly,
I wet my bed last night. What did you say?
he obviously didn't mean to say that, but brushes it off. Honestly though, my favorite part about this little interaction with Kyle is that Eric for some reason is pretending to drink scotch. I don't know why, but I find that really funny. Cartman is then thrown a party, and he gets praised for being brave enough to go on national TV for his disorder. Also, I think I found an animation mistake here, because why on earth would Kyle be smiling in this shot? While Cartman is giving his speech, he starts blurting out things that he doesn't mean to, implying that he's actually starting to develop Tourette's.
I fantasize about kissing Patty Nelson! Ew.
He panics and runs to the bathroom and tries to get Butter's take on things.
One time, my cousin and I touched wieners!
Yeah, Cartman is never beating the gay allegations. He's entering full panic mode by now because he's actually developing these real tics. This is not possible, but it makes for a funny plotline. Because finally, this little asshole knows what it's like to be someone with tics. He tries to get out of going on to Dateline, so he makes a visit to Chris Hansen. When he tells Hansen that he isn't gonna do the show,
Why don't you have a seat?
this is an obvious reference to his show. I mean, you really do wonder why most of the predators actually sit down and talk with him instead of just bolting out the door. But yeah, it really does feel like he has some superpower, and the way it makes Cartman move his arms like that always sends me. Eric explains that he used to say cool things like,
Jews being lame and stuff, but now it's gotten really bad.
Chris Hansen basically threatens him, talking about a time where a person from To Catch a Predator ran back into his house and they tried to locate the man, but he ended up...
He shot himself.
Yeah, this actually happened in real life if you didn't know, and it caused a lot of controversy during this time.
And then shot himself in the head.
And he had a pistol in his hand.
After he threatens Eric,
I just peed my pants!
Cartman then starts praying to God, attempting to show remorse, but somehow ends up blaming God.
You must see how this is all somewhat your fault, right?
This is just a beautiful showing of Cartman's narcissism. Meanwhile, Kyle and Thomas are devising a plan of their own to make sure Eric doesn't end up on TV, still thinking that at this point, Cartman wants to be on the show. They do this by inviting a bunch of predators to the studio. This is likely a subtle joke on no matter how obvious a setup is, a predator will still take that risk. And once they arrive, they see Chris Hansen and they start unaliving themselves.
Wait a minute. Oh, God, it's Chris Hansen. Chris Hansen! I knew it. There aren't really brownies.
This causes the audience to flee the studio, followed by Chris Hansen. Kyle tells Cartman smugly that he is beaten and will not be going on television.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Cat.
Cartman ends up hugging Kyle, to his surprise and anger, of course. Cartman thanks him, explaining how he has been saved from humiliating himself on national TV. He then leaves to find a psychiatrist to help him control what he says. As he skips off singing,
Ah, shit!
this is one of those episodes where, despite Cartman being the worst human ever, he doesn't end up getting what he deserves. Sometimes, it be like that. So the one criticism that TAA had with this episode was that it focused too heavily on the form of Tourette's that involves swearing. Which is fair, considering that only a small percentage of people suffer from those specific tics. But come on. It's South Park, of course they were going to focus on that. I've been reading a lot of posts to find out how people with Tourette's reacted to this episode. Most of them say they enjoyed it, but a common negative I see is that it caused people to bring up the episode when meeting them for the first time. Oh, you have Tourette's? Have you seen the South Park episode? Yeah, that's definitely out of pocket. I'm the #1 South Park glazer, and not even I would mention this episode to someone with Tourette's, unless I was just their friend first. That's just extreme levels of being socially unaware. But aside from those two things, Tourette's was portrayed almost perfectly. It educated while still being able to poke fun at a sensitive topic, but most importantly, it was just really funny.
Dick tits!
Also, you might be wondering what Chris Hansen thought about this episode. He was actually pretty chill about it.
They make fun, but they do it in an intelligent, biting way.
Absolutely.
And I had absolutely no issue with it whatsoever.
He also added that at the time, his kids thought it was the coolest thing he's ever been a part of, which is pretty hilarious. I'd like to know if anyone watching this video has Tourette's. It's something that I found myself very interested in while doing research on this video. Go ahead and let me know your experiences and your thoughts on this episode. I'll also be leaving a link in the description for a website that I use to reference some Tourette's facts, in case anyone else watching this is interested. I hope you guys enjoyed my video. Don't forget to subscribe, and thank you so much for watching.